Holt Garage, Macon, Georgia, Thursday morning 9:15. Renata Voss arrived in a white Audi with the Sterling Wellness Group logo on the door panel. She had 2 assistants with her and a contractor who carried a clipboard. Fletcher Holt was under a Silverado when they pulled in. He rolled out when he heard the heels on the concrete. He stood. He did not wipe his hands. Renata looked at the bay, then at the waiting room with its 3 plastic chairs and the coffee maker on the folding table, then at him. "Mr. Holt." She said it the way someone says a word they've already decided not to use again. "We've completed the property assessment. Sterling Wellness will not be moving forward with any partnership arrangement. I'd encourage you to consider your options carefully. A facility like this," she gestured once at the bay, the open hood, the oil-stained floor, "has a limited runway in a neighborhood that's changing." Fletcher looked at her. He did not answer. "I'd recommend speaking with a realtor." She turned to her assistant. "Send the formal letter by end of day." She walked back to the Audi. The contractor followed. One assistant paused at the door and looked back. She did not say anything. She got in the car. Fletcher went back under the Silverado, the garage quieted by 5. The 2 other mechanics, Darius and Polk, drove out in their respective trucks. Fletcher stayed to finish an alignment on a Tacoma that had come in that morning listing left. He finished it at 5:40. He swept the bay. He turned off the compressor. He locked the supply room. In the car on the way to Birchwood Elementary, he did not turn on the radio. The afternoon was gray, a flat Georgia overcast that couldn't decide whether to rain. He pulled to the curb 2 minutes before the bell. Nola came out with her backpack on and a sheet of paper folded into a triangle. She climbed in and buckled without being told. "We made boats today," she said. "Paper ones. Did you test it?" "In the sink in the bathroom. Mrs. Okafor let us. Sounds like a good teacher. She lets us do experiments." Nola smoothed the triangle on her knee. "Daddy, what's a wellness center?" He looked at her. "Some kids at recess said there's going to be one where the garage is. A wellness center with a smoothie bar. Where'd they hear that?" "I don't know. Is it true?" "No." She nodded. She looked out the window. She had learned at 7 that no from her father meant no, not maybe, not probably, not let's see. She trusted his no's the way she trusted the fact that the sun came up over the peach orchard behind their house every morning, and the garage smelled like motor oil and iron, and everything was where it was supposed to be. They stopped at the garage on the way home so Fletcher could leave the Tacoma keys on the hook for morning pickup. Nola got out and walked along the side of the building, where the old gas pump housing still stood, painted over 3 times in the last 40 years. She found a small hex bolt in the gravel. She put it in her jacket pocket. She did not see the white business card on the mat inside the door. Fletcher did. He picked it up and slid it into his shirt pocket without comment. At home off Pio Nono Avenue, he heated the soup his mother had left in the refrigerator labeled Tuesday, but it was fine by Thursday. His mother, Bess, came over at 6 with a bag of cornbread from the place on Vinville that Nola called the Yellow Building. Bess was 68 and moved slower since her hip, but she came to dinner on Thursdays because she believed children needed the sound of other voices at the table. "How was your day?" she said. It was a day, that bad. A woman came to look at the shop. Which woman? Sterling Wellness. They own the 2 buildings on either side now. Bess broke the cornbread into pieces and set them on Nola's plate without looking up. People see what they want to see. They don't usually see what something actually is until someone shows them. Fletcher did not answer. He passed the salt. Nola told Bess about the paper boats. Bess asked whether hers was a sailboat or a rowboat. Nola said she hadn't decided yet. Bess said that was smart to leave things open. After dinner, Nola brushed her teeth and asked for the library book about rivers. Fletcher read her 4 pages. She was asleep before the 5th. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her in the dim light. The paper boat folded on her nightstand next to the small river stone she'd found at the state park 2 summers ago. Back in the kitchen, he washed the dishes while Bess got her coat. "She looks like Diane when she's sleeping," Bess said. Fletcher said nothing. He dried a bowl and set it on the rack. Bess tapped the doorframe twice on her way out, an old habit. Fletcher listened to her car pull down the drive. He turned off the porch light. He sat at the kitchen table for a while with his hands folded and the tick of the kitchen clock and the slow sound of his daughter breathing in the next room. He set the business card on the table. Sterling Wellness Group, Renata Voss, Chief Development Officer. He looked at it once. He turned it face down. He went to bed at 10. He did not check his phone. Renata drove north on Riverside Drive the next morning with a folder of zoning pre-applications on the passenger seat. Her father had told her once, when she was still in law school, that you deliver hard news to people's faces or you don't deliver it at all. She had sent a letter yesterday. The letter wasn't enough. She turned into the lot of Holt Garage at 9 and parked beside the work truck. Fletcher was at the side of the building replacing a corroded section of gutter channel. He looked down from the ladder when her car door closed. He did not greet her. She walked across the lot with the folder in her hand. "Mr. Holt, I wanted to come in person. The formal letter is redundant, but I thought you deserved." "I got the letter. I wanted to say it directly. Sterling Wellness is not moving forward." He came down from the ladder. He took the folder she held out. He set it on the hood of his truck without opening it. "Thank you, Ms. Voss." That was all. She had prepared for anger. She had prepared for the kind of negotiation that turned into a grievance. She had not prepared for the particular dignity of a man who received bad news the way someone receives weather, as a thing that has arrived, not a thing to argue with. At 9:15, a black Chevy Suburban turned into the lot from Riverside Drive and stopped on the gravel. A man in a dark suit climbed out of the passenger side. Another man, older, followed. The older man wore a sport coat and moved the way men move when they've spent decades making other men comfortable with their authority. He passed Renata without looking at her. He stopped 3 feet in front of Fletcher Holt. Sergeant Major Holt. His voice was level. It'd been 6 years. The garage sounds did not stop. A compressor ran somewhere inside. A car passed on the street. The Suburban ticked as it cooled. Fletcher pulled a rag from his back pocket. He folded it once and set it on the truck hood beside the folder. He did not extend his hand. He stood the way a man stands when he no longer has to stand at attention and knows the difference. General Aiken. Renata had not moved. The words Sergeant Major were hanging in the air between them, and she did not yet know what to do with them. General Douglas Aiken spoke clearly enough that she could hear. "I came to ask you something. The Army Corps is coordinating a civilian infrastructure recovery assessment in Savannah. We need licensed mechanical operators with specialized vehicle restoration experience and security clearance history. Your shop is one of 4 in Georgia that qualifies. I drove here to ask in person." Fletcher listened without moving. Aiken turned then for the first time and looked at Renata Voss, Miss. In April of 2016 in Kandahar province, a medevac convoy lost its lead vehicle to an IED. 3 soldiers were pinned. Sergeant Major Holt drove a field recovery rig through active fire and pulled that vehicle clear. The convoy got out. 3 soldiers came home. The Army surgeon who operated on one of them that night was your brother. Renata did not speak. Behind her eyes, the phrase from yesterday played again in her own voice. "A facility like this has a limited runway." Fletcher looked back at Aiken. "General, I appreciate you coming. I'm not re-enlisting or contracting." Aiken nodded. He did not argue. He reached into his jacket and placed a card on the hood of Fletcher's truck, beside the folder Renata had set there. "My door's open, Sergeant Major. It always will be." He turned and walked back toward the Suburban. The man in the suit was already at the driver door. Before he got in, he paused beside Renata. He kept his voice low. "Ma'am, what he carries he doesn't talk about. Don't ask about his wife. The shop's the thing that keeps him in one place." The door closed. The Suburban backed out and turned north. Renata stood on the gravel and did not move. The wind off the Ocmulgee River carried the smell of cut grass and something metallic from the rail yard 2 blocks over. She had not known he was a sergeant major. She had not known he had been a soldier who'd pulled men out of fire. She had not known he had a wife, had a wife. Across the lot, Fletcher picked up both cards from the hood of his truck and went into the garage. He did not look back at her. He went back to the gutter channel because the channel needed finishing, and it was 9:20 on a Thursday in October. At 10:40, she called her brother from the parking lot of a gas station on Riverside Drive. She did not trust her voice in the Sterling Wellness building. "Tell me about Kandahar," she said. There was a pause on the other end. "Renata, tell me." Dr. Graham Voss was quiet for a count, then he began. "April 2016. We had a convoy coming in with 3 critical. The lead vehicle hit an IED on the road outside Sarposa. The vehicle was on its side, partially blocking the exit route. We couldn't get through. We were going to lose the time we needed." He stopped. There was a recovery unit a quarter-mile back. The sergeant major drove a rig into an unsecured corridor to flip that vehicle and clear the road. He did it alone. We're through in 4 minutes. I operated on a 22-year-old that night who went home to his mother in Biloxi. He would not have made it another hour." Renata said nothing. "I don't know this man's name," Graham said, "but if you're asking me whether he's someone worth your respect, that answer is yes. Unconditionally yes." She drove to a military surplus store on Eisenhower Parkway, the kind her father used to stop at when he was still in the reserve. She found a tin of the coffee she'd heard veterans talk about, the kind from the PX that everyone who'd served seemed to know by its dark green label. The man at the counter was retired Army. He wrapped it in paper without being asked. At 3 that afternoon, she returned to Holt Garage. She did not call ahead. She filled a thermos from the coffee maker in her car and walked across the lot and set it on the work table inside the bay. "My brother said you'd know what you did for him even if you don't know his name." Fletcher looked at the thermos for a long moment. He picked it up. He unscrewed the cap. He poured into 2 paper cups from the shelf above the sink and held one out. They sat on the concrete step outside the bay door. They drank the coffee. Bess pulled in at the far end of the lot to drop off a sandwich she'd made for Fletcher's lunch. When she saw Renata on the step, she did not stop. She set the bag on the hood of his truck and nodded once in their direction, the small nod of a woman who has been watching her son carry weight alone for too long. Nola came out of the small office in the back where she did her homework after school let out early. She had a rusted square nut in one hand. She knelt beside Renata and held the nut up. "Do you know what this is off of?" "I don't." "Daddy thinks it's off a '68 Camaro. I think it's off something older." Renata looked at it without touching it. "Are you the lady from yesterday? The one with the folder?" "Yes." "Daddy didn't say anything about you. Not mean or nice." Renata did not answer. She did not yet know what the right answer would be. Nola turned the square nut in her fingers, decided it was staying in her collection, and went back inside. Fletcher watched his daughter hand something to this woman and disappear through the door without ceremony. He said nothing. That evening, after Renata had driven home and turned off her laptop, a message came through on her work phone from a number she didn't recognize. The name in the message signature was Prescott Holdings, LLC. The message was polite and brief. Clive Prescott, principal, would like to schedule a call regarding a development opportunity he was assembling on the Riverside corridor. He called it the Macon River Quarter. He said he would send a prospectus. The prospectus arrived as a PDF at 11 that night. She opened it at her kitchen counter with a glass of water in her hand. She set the glass down carefully when she saw what was at the center of the land parcel map. Holt Garage. The full half-acre lot on Riverside, marked for demolition and ground-up mixed-use residential. Anchor parcel in a $48 million development. She did not call anyone. She did not sleep. By 6 the next morning she had a list. She called her company's land records contact at 7:30. "I need every parcel transfer on the Riverside corridor for the last 24 months. Cross-reference Prescott Holdings and any LLC with a shared registered agent, and I need it before Friday. That's not a standard pull, Renata. I know what I did on Thursday. I'm trying to undo it. Help me." A pause. "One favor, I know. Use it well." The records came in by encrypted file share that afternoon. She laid them across her kitchen table and worked until midnight with a highlighter. She drew lines in red between the entities and their filings. The pattern was on paper by the time the coffee was cold. Prescott Holdings had assembled 9 contiguous parcels along the Riverside corridor through 3 shell companies: Macon River Properties, Central Georgia Renewal Group, and Bibb County Land Partners. All 3 shared a registered agent in Warner Robins, a strip mall office between a copy center and an insurance broker. The same signature appeared on every filing. Of the 9 parcels, 8 were assembled. The 9th, the one without which there was no unobstructed river access for the proposed development, was Holt Garage. Estimated value after rezoning, $48 million. She drove to the garage the next morning. She did not bring coffee. She brought the maps printed on large sheets and rolled under her arm. She spread them on the hood of Fletcher's truck. He stood beside her in his coveralls and looked. He did not seem surprised. He nodded once, slowly. Prescott's been trying to get this lot since 2021. He couldn't figure out how to do it legally without the corridor complete. Why does he want it specifically? Old story. He did not look up from the map. I told it once, I'm not telling it again. She did not push. Nola came around from behind the building with a robin's egg, pale blue, intact, held in both palms. She held it out to Renata carefully. Renata looked at it. She did not touch it. Where did you find it? Under the oak. It fell, but it didn't break. I'm going to put it back. She turned and walked back around the building to do exactly that. Fletcher watched his daughter carry something fragile with extraordinary care and did not say a word. That afternoon, the man from the Suburban, Renata later learned his name, was Sergeant First Class Garland, Aiken's aide, stopped by the garage on his way somewhere else. He left a covered dish from his wife on the office counter, said hello to Nola, and caught Fletcher near the bay door on his way out. Sir, there's something you need to know exists. I kept a copy when you told me to get rid of it. It's in my locker at Robbins. When you're ready, Garland. I know what you said. I never agreed to it. Garland got in his truck and pulled out of the lot. Fletcher stood at the gutter for a long time, watching the street settle back into ordinary traffic. That night, Renata set the robin's egg on her windowsill next to her keys. She looked at it for a while before she went to bed. She was not entirely sure what she was doing. She only knew she had begun doing it. The call came at 10:45. The number was a Macon exchange she didn't recognize. Mrs. Voss, this is Garland. If you want to know why Prescott is willing to spend legal fees for 2 years to get a half-acre garage, you need to see the 2020 OSHA Mechanical Subcontractor Review. I have the unredacted version. Meet me at Okmulgee Coffee on Broadway tomorrow at 7. Bring a plain envelope. Don't tell Holt. She did not answer immediately. I'll be there. She set the phone on the counter. She poured a glass of water and did not drink it. She thought about the robin's egg on the windowsill and about Fletcher in the lot watching his daughter carry it like something that might still be saved. By morning, she would know what Clive Prescott wanted from Fletcher Holt, and she would know it wasn't the land. Okmulgee Coffee opened at 7. Garland was already at a corner table in a gray fleece with a paper cup and a manila envelope on the chair beside him. When she arrived, she sat. He slid the envelope across. Read it here, don't take it. Inside were 2 sets of pages. The first was a OSHA Mechanical Subcontractor Review of Prescott Fleet Solutions, a vehicle maintenance contractor based in Warner Robins, dated October 2020. The second was a follow-on Army Criminal Investigation Division report, marked restricted, dated March 2021. The lead civilian investigator was Fletcher Holt, licensed mechanical engineer, contracted to the 3rd Army Logistics Command. She read the first page, the second, the third. The review found that Prescott Fleet Solutions had falsified inspection certifications on 31 vehicles across Army Reserve motor pools between 2018 and 2020. Among those vehicles were 4 troop transport buses used on a deployment rotation through Fort Stewart. One of those buses had experienced brake failure on a training convoy in November of 2020 on Route 17 outside Savannah. 6 soldiers injured, 1 killed. The investigation had been conducted by the NTSB and an Army Safety Board. Fletcher Holt had been recused from the final accident board for personal involvement. She turned the page. Among the 6 injured in the Route 17 accident was Diane Holt, occupational therapist assigned to the 78th Medical Brigade, riding as a passenger in the support vehicle directly behind the failed bus. She had survived the initial impact. She had not survived the surgery. Renata read the name twice. She set the report down on the table. Her hands were steady. Something behind her sternum was not. Garland was watching her. He did the contractor review, Garland said. He couldn't touch the accident board. He could touch the paperwork, so he touched the paperwork. The CD report went up through the chain. Prescott Fleet was debarred from Army contracting in May 2021. Clive Prescott's appeal was denied in August. His company was finished. And then Prescott came for the garage. He can't sue Holt directly, the report was government work. But he can make it financially impossible for him to keep operating. Buy the surrounding lots, squeeze the access, make the neighborhood expensive enough to push him out. It took him 2 years to get the rest of the corridor. Renata closed the envelope. She drove to the garage with it on the passenger seat. Fletcher was in the pit beneath a transit van. She stood at the edge. Garland kept these. He came up out of the pit. He looked at the envelope. He took it. He looked at the first page and set it on the workbench without finishing. I told him to destroy them. Why didn't you push to make the report public? He looked at her for a count of 3 breaths. Diane wasn't coming back, regardless. He picked up a wrench and set it down in a different spot. Nola was 5. She needed a father who was present, not a man who spent 3 years at hearings. The next words came out of Renata before she had planned them. There's a public hearing on this parcel in 11 days. A silence. I know. How long have you known? 40 days. You weren't going to fight it. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. She did not raise her voice. You are going to fight it now, she said, and so am I. He looked at her, then at the envelope on the workbench, then back at her. He did not say yes, he did not say no. He picked up the envelope, walked into the office, and put it in the bottom drawer of his desk. She called her land records contact on the way to her car. I need every Prescott Holdings filing from the last 24 months in front of me before Thursday. We are going to the city council. The Macon City Council chamber on the night of November 7th was full. The Telegraph had a reporter in the second row. A local television crew had set up near the back column. Fletcher Holt wore a dark blue button-down and clean slacks. No uniform because he had no uniform to wear anymore and had not wanted one. He sat in the third row beside Renata Voss. Clive Prescott spoke first, as a private citizen, having recused himself from the relevant council vote in writing the previous month. He spoke about commercial blight. He spoke about environmental liability from legacy fuel storage. He spoke about the Macon River Corridor as an opportunity for working families on the East Corridor. He did not look at Fletcher when he said the word blight. Renata Voss stood when he sat down. She introduced herself as Chief Development Officer of Sterling Wellness Group, a Georgia-based private health development company. She spoke in an even voice. She made 3 points. First, Holt Garage held a current EPA Tier 2 underground storage certification and was one of 6 certified vintage and specialty vehicle restoration facilities in the state of Georgia, with an active U.S. Army logistics contractor designation. The property under discussion was not blight. It was a licensed operating business with an active government relationship. Second, she held up a one-page schematic. Prescott Holdings LLC had assembled 9 contiguous parcels through 3 shell companies, sharing a single registered agent in Warner Robins. The timing of the acquisitions, the shell structure, and the zoning application timeline showed a pattern consistent with targeted economic coercion against a specific property owner who had filed a federal contractor review adverse to Prescott's commercial interests. Third, she moved to postpone the vote pending an ethics and conflict of interest inquiry into Prescott Holdings. The chamber murmured. Clive Prescott leaned toward his microphone. His voice was measured. He had been practicing reasonable for 15 years. Ms. Voss is defending a mechanic's garage. The question the council should ask is why. There was a half-second of silence. In the back of the chamber, a man in a civilian jacket stood up. He did not approach the microphone or speak. He simply stood. The reporter from the Telegraph turned, recognized him, and wrote 2 words in her notebook. General Douglas Aiken, retired, U.S. Army Forces Command. Clive Prescott shifted the papers in front of him. Fletcher Holt stood. He did not go to the microphone for several seconds. When he spoke from where he was standing, both hands on the back of the bench in front of him. My wife was a soldier and a healer. She rode in a government vehicle maintained by a contractor who falsified the inspection records. She did not die because of bad luck. She died because someone signed a document that was not true. He did not look at Prescott. He looked at the council table. I conducted the review that documented what that contractor did. I gave the report to the people above me. I accepted their decision to handle it administratively because Nola was 5 years old and she needed a father who came home every day, not one who spent the next 3 years on a crusade. I am not standing here for revenge. He paused. His voice dropped. I am standing here because if I don't, the next family doesn't know what hit them. Diane used to say that the point of fixing something broken is so the next person doesn't get hurt by it. She said it about axles and she meant it about everything else too. He looked down at his hands on the bench. My daughter still carries the tools her mother gave her. She is 7 years old and she already knows that a thing works or it doesn't, and that the difference matters. Diane should have come home to teach her that herself. The chamber was very quiet. The council voted to postpone the rezoning indefinitely and to open an inquiry into Prescott Holdings LLC. The Telegraph ran the shell company map above the fold on Sunday. By Tuesday, a state ethics board had opened a preliminary review. By Thursday, Clive Prescott had requested an indefinite leave of absence from his remaining board positions. His statement said he needed time for family. The next morning, the lot was wet from overnight rain. Renata drove out at 6:30 and parked behind Fletcher's truck. She did not know exactly what she had come for. She came anyway. He was in the office with the lights on, pouring coffee from an enamel percolator into a metal cup the color of river silt. He poured a second cup and held it out without looking up. She took it. The morning was cool, the cup was warm. They stood at the window looking out at the lot. Outside, Nola came down the side path in her jacket with something cupped in both hands. She pushed the office door open with her shoulder and walked straight to Renata. She opened her hands. A small wrench child-sized with a red rubber handle, old, the grip worn smooth on one side. "This was Mama's," Nola said. "She had it from when she was little. Daddy says it still works." She held it out until Renata took it from her. The room was still. Bess sat in the corner chair with her coffee. She did not say anything. She nodded once, slow. Fletcher stood at the percolator with the cup still in his hand. He did not look at his daughter. He looked at the floor, then at the window. Something in his shoulders moved the way it had moved in the lot, when Nola had walked away with the egg. It was the first time in 3 years that Nola had given something of Diane's to another person's hands. Renata held the wrench carefully. She did not trust herself to do anything else with it. That afternoon, General Aiken called Fletcher's phone. "Sergeant Major, I am calling to offer something. The Corps of Engineers is standing up a civilian mechanical consultant position for the Savannah Recovery Assessment. 1 year, renewable. You don't report to me. You report to the project director. Your shop stays open. You drive to Savannah twice a week." Fletcher was quiet. "I'm also calling to say something else. I signed off on the classification level of the 2020 subcontractor review. I told myself it was cleaner to handle it administratively. I was protecting a decision I had made that I did not want scrutinized. I was wrong. I am not asking you back because the Army needs your expertise. I am asking because you were right about what that report needed to be, and I owe you the chance to decide what you do next, on your own terms." A long silence. "I'll think about it," Fletcher said. "Not for the Army, for Garland." He kept the file. "Understood, Sergeant Major." Bess was admitted to the hospital 9 days later. Not her heart, the doctors said. Her blood pressure had been climbing for months and she had not told anyone. The doctor used the phrase "managed carefully going forward." Renata came to the hospital that evening. She did not say much. She sat in the chair beside Bess's bed with a thermos of sweet tea from the diner on Vinville that Bess had mentioned once in passing 4 weeks earlier. Bess took a long sip and set it on the tray table. "Your mother used to bring sweet tea to people," she said in a thin voice. "I can always tell the daughters who were raised to do it right." Fletcher watched Renata sit and did not say anything. Fletcher Holt accepted the civilian consultant position with the Army Corps Savannah project on the 1st of December. He kept the garage. He drove to Savannah on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest of the week he was in coveralls. Sterling Wellness Group and Holt Garage signed a service partnership agreement on the same day. Sterling would contract Holt Garage for the fleet maintenance of its company vehicles across the Georgia network. The contract was 12 pages. The 13th page was a writer Renata had written in pencil first and then in ink. The Diane Holt Memorial Trade Scholarship. 3% of net annual contract value, in perpetuity, directed to vocational and trade school scholarships for children of Georgia-based Army Reserve and National Guard families. First preference to children of the 78th Medical Brigade. The trust documents listed her full name, Diane Holt. For the first time in any legal or financial filing in 3 years. Fletcher read the writer. He set the pen down. He looked at the page for a long time. "She believed in trades," he said finally. "She thought the country had forgotten that things need to be fixed by people who know how to fix them." He signed. Bess came home from the hospital on a Saturday. She was fine or fine enough, which in Bess's estimation was all anyone had the right to ask for. That Sunday Renata came to dinner in Pio Nono Avenue. She brought nothing because she had been invited, not because she was expected to bring something. Nola fell asleep on the sofa after the dishes were done, the small red-handled wrench tucked under the couch cushion where she apparently kept important things. Bess hugged Renata at the door for a moment and then patted her hand. Renata stayed to help clean the kitchen. Fletcher washed. She dried. They did not speak much. The water ran. The light over the sink hummed with the particular hum of fluorescent lights that have been doing their job for 20 years and intend to keep doing it. She dried a plate and set it on the rack. He washed another. She dried it. They moved through it in a rhythm that no one had to think about. When the last cup was done, she reached into her coat pocket and set the small red-handled wrench on the windowsill above the sink. It was not a declaration. It was a kitchen, and the wrench was exactly where it belonged. 6 weeks later, in the second week of January, The light came in at a low angle that turned the puddles in the lot to mirrors. The pecan trees along the fence had dropped the last of their leaves. Nola was off from school for a teacher workday and had been in the garage since 8 trying to diagnose what she'd decided was a knocking sound in the old parts truck. There was no knocking sound. She'd decided there was one so she could help. Fletcher watched her from 10 feet away with a coffee cup in his hand. Renata pulled in at 9. She got out of the car and walked through the gate without calling ahead. She did not need to anymore. Fletcher was at the back of the parts truck showing Nola how to listen with the palm of your hand flat on the hood. You feel the difference, he was saying, between what's mechanical and what's just the engine being an engine. How do you know? You practice. You put your hand down a lot of times and eventually you know. Nola put her hand flat on the hood and closed her eyes in concentration. Fletcher looked up and saw Renata at the edge of the lot. He did not say anything. He held out his hand. She walked over. The 3 of them stood at the front of the parts truck. Nola's hand still flat on the hood, listening for something that wasn't there but that she was going to find anyway. Anything, Fletcher said. Nola opened her eyes. I think it's fine, actually. I think so too, so we don't have to fix it. Not everything that's worth listening to needs fixing. Nola thought about this. She took her hand off the hood. She looked at Renata. Do you want to learn? You put your hand like this. Renata put her hand flat on the hood beside Nola's. The engine was off. The hood was cool and still. Nola was quiet for a moment. You have to wait, she said. Renata waited. Fletcher stood beside her. He did not turn to look at her. He looked at the hood, at the lot, at the pale January light along the roofline. Then he reached out, rested the back of his hand against the back of hers. Just that, the lightest of contacts. Nola looked at the 2 hands on the hood and then back at the horizon with the focused, private expression of someone who has decided not to interrupt something. Down at the far end of the lot, the wind moved through the pecan branches and something lifted briefly and settled. And for the first time since the Route 17 road came for Diane Holt, the sound of the garage, the ordinary imperfect continuing sound of it, was not something Fletcher was carrying alone.